Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our WVABLE special topic webinar, walkthrough of the online organizational ALR registration process. Your presenters today are myself, Roxanne Clay, the WVABLE Program Director, and then we also have Thomas Hatch, who is the Stable Account Operations Manager. And so next slide, we're just going to go over just a few housekeeping items. This WVABLE webinar will be recorded and will be made available to the public for viewing on demand. So by joining the webinar, you automatically consent to this recording. And if you don't wish to have your voice recorded, just you don't have to speak in the webinar. You can just enter your questions into the chat. All attendee microphones have been muted to eliminate any background noise, but during the Q&A portion, we will unmute the microphones. We welcome your questions, encourage them. Please include your questions in the chat box, and we will save all the questions to the end of the webinar. So during today's webinar, we have three main parts. I'm going to provide a very brief and high-level program overview of WVABLE program, which includes the core benefits and recent updates. I'll spend about 10 minutes on this, and then I'm going to turn everything over to Thomas Hatch, where he will take over and provide the rest of the webinar, which will essentially give you a walkthrough of the org ALR online registration process. And then we will also have Q&A at the end. So for those of you that are not familiar with WVABLE, it is West Virginia's ABLE program. And what ABLE is all about is the ABLE accounts allow for individuals with disabilities to save without it jeopardizing their eligibility for public benefit programs. This includes supplemental security income, Medicaid, SNAP, and HUD. Over the next hour, you're going to hear us say WVABLE, ABLE, and STABLE. No, they're all the same. WVABLE is West Virginia's ABLE program. ABLE refers to the federal legislation called the ABLE Act that makes WVABLE possible. And STABLE is the name of the account and our program manager. So I wanted to provide you a screenshot of our WVABLE.com website. This is the hub where everything takes place. This is where you're going to go to learn more and take a more in-depth insight into the key parts of the overview of the program that I'm going to speak about today. This is also where you will go as an organization ALR. There is a tab that is dedicated specifically for you, in which Tom will take you to that tab a little bit later during this presentation. This is also where you're going to go to log into your accounts once you have those established. Our stable account forms are also going to be located there at the resources tab. Real quick, if you were to go out and Google WVABLE, it is possible that WVABLE website is not what comes up first. We have some other national programs whose website may appear, so we want to make sure that you and any other folks that you work with understand that there is a difference, that there are 47 different ABLE programs nationwide, and of course WVABLE is West Virginia's ABLE program, and we have a dedicated website for that. Also, when we talk about what WVABLE is, essentially, and what is at the core of our program, is that the accounts do not affect eligibility for public benefit programs, including SSI and Medicaid. We know that those public benefit programs have a $2,000 asset limit in order to be eligible or to maintain eligibility. However, with an ABLE account, individuals can contribute way above $2,000 and still maintain their benefits for SSI and Medicaid, including SNAP and HUD benefits. Our program launched February the 9th of 2018, so we celebrated our 7th anniversary earlier this year. And our WVABLE program, it is offered to West Virginia residents through a partnership with the Ohio Stable program. So know that Stable was actually the first state in the nation to establish their ABLE program. And they spent quite a bit of money and resources into developing their platform. Once it was established, they opened it up and invited other states to partner. So that is what West Virginia did. So we are very fortunate to be part of the STABLE program. It is one of the most largest ABLE programs nationwide. And ABLE accounts also, they provide people with disabilities financial independence. You as an organization that you are managing SSI benefit payments, you are likely have come across the challenge of having to spend down funds in order to stay below the $2,000 asset limit. So ABLE accounts eliminates that piece. And then we have additional benefits for individuals with disabilities. I go into more in depth about the benefits and all of this in my 1-hour webinar presentations, in which I offer a lunch and learn. So for those of you that are interested in learning more in depth, just know that I do have those available. But as far as the next slide, when we talk about eligibility, this is the piece we certainly want you to be to know about. We do have an eligibility quiz on our website at WVABLE.com. It takes folks through a series of yes or no questions in which they know if they're eligible, but we definitely want you to review the information that's included on that page. And what you're going to find is, first of all, you do have to be a West Virginia resident. And then the onset of the disability would have had to have occurred before the age of 26. That is the current requirement. And when I say onset of disability, this is not the diagnosis, this is the onset of the symptoms. And then another myth I'll mention real quick is some folks think they have to have enrolled in an ABLE account before the age of 26. That is not the case. You can enroll at any age, just that the onset of the disability would have had to have occurred before age 26. Now, a really critical update to the eligibility criteria that takes place come January 1 of 26 is that it's the passage of the ABLE age adjustment. And what it's doing, it's increasing that age of onset of disability to before age 46. So we want to make sure that you know about this update. So in addition to the West Virginia residency onset of disability before age 26, you need to have one of the following criteria, is that the individual is eligible or entitled to receive SSI or SSDI due to the disability or blindness. They don't have to be receiving SSI in order to be eligible. So if you are working with an individual who is only on Medicaid, but they're not actually currently receiving SSI, know that they could still be eligible for an ABLE account. It's all based on that disability and does it meet Social Security standards for a disability. If they are not receiving SSI or you're not sure if they have that disability that meets Social Security standards, then you can go down this list. And does the individual have a condition that is listed on Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances conditions? Or you can do what's called self-certification. So we have a form on our website at the resources tab and the stable account forms. It's called the physician diagnosis form. You'll have the physician to complete this form, and you're not going to upload it during the enrollment. You're simply going to hold on to it in case it's ever requested, but essentially the physician, whether it be the current treating physician or the physician that provided the initial diagnosis, they are certifying the disability diagnosis, that it meets Social Security standards for a disability, okay? And then during the enrollment, you would just check mark that as the criteria in which they are eligible for an ABLE account. When we talk about enrollment, we have individual ALR enrollment, or this would be an individual who is self-enrolling, or they're going to be self-managing their own account. Of course, they're going to go to WVABLE.com. They're going to click open an account. And then, of course, what you all are joining us today is to learn about the organizational ALR enrollment, in which we have an online registration process. With either enrollment, it does require a $25 minimum opening deposit. This is not a fee, it just creates the opening balance. Enrollment can be done by either the individual with a disability. We call them the account owner. We also call them the account beneficiary. Okay, but that's a question that I get sometimes is what is an ALR? What is account beneficiary? The beneficiary is the individual with a disability. They're the ones who technically own the account. Okay, and then we have an authorized legal representative. So when the individual is not able to establish and manage their own account, perhaps they don't want to or they want help, then they can, the ABLE Act says that an authorized legal representative can do so on their behalf. And the list that you see on the right, these are the individuals that fall under this category. So during the time of enrollment, you would identify which you fall under. So we have the agent acting under a power of attorney. We have a conservator legal guardian that's been approved by the courts. We have a spouse, parent, sibling, grandparent, and the Social Security Rep Payee. Now, of course, for your all circumstances, we have, and I've mentioned this, we have a tab that is specific to your all's online registration, and I've just included that on this slide there. The page on our website that's committed to you. So as far as funding the account, there are several ways. You can do an EFT transfer in which you have linked a current checking or savings account within the stable account platform, and you're just moving funds over via EFT. Always allow about 2 to 3 business days for those funds to transfer. You can also mail in a check to stable account. We have a check contribution form at the resources tab of our website that you can include with your check. It also has the mailing address of where the check would for stable account. There's also the ability to do what's called Social Security direct deposit, in which you're setting up for that Social Security benefit payment to be directly deposited into the stable account. There's also payroll direct deposit. And then we also have the gifting page. When a contribution is made into a stable account, you have 5 investment options to choose from. The bank safe option is the option that is 100% FDIC insured option, where the principal is protected. And then we have 4 Vanguard mutual fund options that range from aggressive to conservative. I go over these in more detail in my longer presentations, but just know the bank safe is the one that is the FDIC insured option. Funds in an ABLE account can be used for what's called qualified disability expenses. This is any expense that supports the beneficiary. There's not a true list. They didn't want it to be restrictive, but think of it in terms that the expense, it must relate to the disability, and then it must help to maintain or improve that individual's health, their independence, or quality of life. So what you see on the slide are spending categories in which the expenses would fall under, but food, everyday living expenses, transportation, gym membership, going to the movies, those are all qualified disability expenses. This is an IRS program, so it is to their purview to audit. And so we do recommend just keeping receipts and writing notes on those receipts. But you can also think of it in terms of what would not qualify. So gambling, tobacco, alcohol, or giving the money away or buying gifts for others. Those would be considered a non-qualified disability expense. How do you get money out of the account? If you have that linked checking or savings account within the stable account platform, to move monies over to make contributions, this is also how you can make withdrawals. Always allow 2 to 3 business days for those funds to actually be moved back to that linked checking or savings account. You can also request for stable account to issue a check to a third party, to the ALR or to the beneficiary. And there's no fee for doing that. And then we also have the stable Visa card. This card is also available to the organizational ALR. And on the slide, in which you will receive a copy of the slide deck, I've hyperlinked a document for your reference that provides more information about that. So some really important numbers that we want you to keep in mind. As mentioned, there is a $25 minimum deposit to open an account. So this would be for each of the accounts that you are establishing. This creates the opening balance. Once that $25 has hit, then that account is in active status and you can start using that account. There is a $2.25 monthly maintenance fee that is charged by a stable account, and that is billed on a quarterly basis. So it's automatically withdrawn at the end of the quarter. So that's $6.75, but it equates to $2.25 monthly. The asset-based fee, this is on the investment options only. This is between 0.19 and 0.33%. This next number we want to make sure that you are aware of. So for 2025, there is an annual contribution limit into an ABLE account, and this would be contributions coming from any source, and that is $19,000. This number in the last several years, it has increased by the IRS by $1,000. So you always want to circle back with WVABLE to know what the current year's annual contribution limit is. Now, for your consumers that are receiving SSI, Social Security allows for up to $100,000 to be in that ABLE account. As the balance. Anything above that starts counting towards the $2,000 asset limit. However, if your folks are not receiving SSI, but they are receiving Medicaid, then there is not this $100,000 cap. It is specific for folks that are receiving SSI. And then for the West Virginia taxpayer that makes contributions into the WVABLE account, they can deduct their taxable income by the amount that they have contributed for that year up to the standard contribution limit. And then in West Virginia, there is no Medicaid clawback upon the passing of the beneficiary. The only exception is by federal requirements, and that would be the West Virginia State Recovery, in which I go into more detail in my longer presentations. We want you to know where to find WVABLE program resources. So for any of you that want to hop on one of my monthly webinars in which I provide this information in more detail, you would go to the WVSTO.com website, and then you would click on Citizens and WVABLE, and you're going to see at the bottom of that page, there's a button for upcoming events. That is where we post all of our monthly webinars and, of course, our special topic webinars like the one today. This is also where we're going to include our on-demand webinar. So we have recorded this training today. We will make it available, and we will post it to our website at that tab as well. That's where you can find all of our recorded webinars. We highly encourage folks to sign up for our newsletter. Those are published monthly. We include reminders, updates to the program, whenever there's contribution limit increases, increased features to the account platforms. It's just a great way to stay connected and for you to stay on top of all the changes with the program at the state and the federal level. You can shoot me an email, the email provided there to sign up, or you can also go to the button to sign up for the newsletter. We have materials too that you can download. And those are located also at the program resources page. We also have a Facebook page. That's a great way to stay connected, and we are very intentional in those posts that they're educational in nature as well. So now I'm going to turn things over to Thomas Hatch, and he is going to provide this walkthrough of the online registration overview, and I'm super excited for you all to have this training today.
Thank you, Roxanne. Great to be with everybody. I'll probably embarrass Roxanne really quickly by saying that she is such an outstanding resource for your state. If you have not had the opportunity to interact with her, I would highly recommend it. She's a great advocate for West Virginia, for this program, and for the disability community. So we're grateful that she invited us to be here today, and I've enjoyed working with her for many, many years on this program. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of back and forth slightly between a couple different things, but we're here to talk about organizations, entities, businesses, companies, however you want to define it. We use the word organization just because it seems to be pretty all-inclusive and defines a little bit better those that we're dealing with in this particular industry. So wanted to first define what an organizational ALR is, ALR standing for Authorized Legal Representative. So an organizational authorized legal representative is just simply one that it can be an entity or an organization or business, like I mentioned, but they've been given authority to manage financial transactions on behalf of a beneficiary or a stable account owner. Roxanne went through the different types of legal authority within the program that are stated within law. And typically, most of these organizational ALRs are going to fall into either being a guardian or conservator, potentially a power of attorney, although I think that's pretty rare. And then probably one of the more common ones is going to be the Social Security Representative Payee. So why does this structure matter? You can set things up as an individual, or you can be an individual authorized legal representative, but why does this organizational structure matter, and why are we offering this? And we think that for those that it applies to, it's super important. So here's about 5 different reasons that I've listed. We'll go through those pretty quickly. One, the registration of the account is attached to the organization. We've gotten lots of feedback that individuals that are employed by a company or an entity or an organization don't necessarily want their personal name associated with these accounts because the authority is not theirs. The authority comes through the company or the organization. And so therefore it's appropriate to have the registration on the account underneath the organization itself. Well, when we go through the walkthrough, you'll see how that's accomplished. Flexibility on the structure of management. This may or may not apply to anybody on the call today, but there is much flexibility. One example of that could be that if you're a larger organization and maybe somehow you're sort of subdivided in by county or by region or by some geographical boundary, you can actually set this up to where you can have a separate individual for each of those geographical boundaries or counties or situations, managing separate groups of accounts, even though they're all under the same organization. So super flexible there and how that is structured and managed. We also have both bulk account establishment options and bulk account funding options that wouldn't be available to an individual. Again, an individual can still manage more than one account, but these particular features would only be available under this structure. So if you get to the point where you've established yourself with a beneficiary account and you want to open quite a few at a time without having to go one by one through every single enrollment, we have options to open those in bulk and maybe to even fund them in bulk, if that's an option that would make sense to you. And then the final one is oversight and reporting options. And on the screen, I do have a quick screen capture of some of the types of reporting that are available to organizations that are not available to individuals. That would be listing of account activity for a specified period of time. That can be a certain date, so you can go in and put starting date and ending date of that report, and it can run either historically or just for a set period of time. We also have a report that lists account balances. So if you want to see an account balance as of the prior day on any given period of time, you can get a whole listing of all your accounts and what their balances are as of that date. And then we also have another report called account setup and process. So this is one where if you're opening accounts here and there throughout a week and you're trying to figure out what is the status, where is it in process, then this report will give some information about, has it been finalized, is there more documentation needed, things of that nature. The final one that I want to go through before we start looking at some of the actual details is a few key terms. We'll run across these terms multiple times, but I sort of wanted to define them now so that when we come to them, they're not just foreign to us at that point in time. There are 3 key individuals that can be or will be involved with these accounts. So the first one is what we call the controlling officer. So this is simply the individual at the company or organization or entity that is designated to make decisions on behalf of the organization. If it's a small organization, it could be someone like a CEO or a COO, something like that. At a larger one, and maybe it could be like a mid-level manager of some sort, but it's an individual that has been given that authority to be able to say, okay, we want to do this and we're going to go forward in this manner. Their information is going to need to be on the registration, which we'll show you shortly. The primary agent is the individual that is responsible for the day-to-day management of the accounts. They will have online access to all of the accounts, and that access would include making contributions, making withdrawals, getting reports. Everything that that you can do to manage the accounts is what the primary agent will do. By the way, the controlling officer could be the primary agent. Doesn't have to be, but could be. And we'll look at those options as well. And then a secondary agent, this is optional, but if somebody wants to put sort of a backup person on the listing as well, they work as a backup. The biggest thing to understand presently and how it's structured is a secondary agent will have phone access only. They can do everything that the primary agent does, but it just has to be done with a customer service representative over the phone. So they can still make contributions, make withdrawals, get account details, all of that. It's just currently over the phone. We are working on and expect that at some point in the future, we'll be able to have online access for more than one agent into the same account, have multiple people that can log into a profile, but presently it's restricted to one. That's why the primary agent would have the primary login access where the secondary would have phone only. So before I start this process or go to this next slide, I wanted to take a moment to jump out and show you in a live manner the WVABLE website. So Roxanne had showed this to you before. And again, WVABLE.com to get out to this website. The main thing you want to do is here on the upper right side, there's a few little lines next to the menu. That's going to open up our total menu to all of the options that you'll want to see. You do have the opportunity to open an account here or to log in. The open account, by the way, goes through our individual registration process. So for those that are doing an organization, we'll show you where to go. This is for the individual. Although the login page you go to log into either profile. So whether you're an individual or organization, that login page will get you into either of the profiles depending on what's been set up. Before I go to the organization, because Roxanne mentioned it, I do want to click on under the resources under forms and show you a few of the forms out here. So this is the forms page. Maybe I'll try to blow it up here a little bit more so you can see more detail. So a couple of the forms that I wanted to point out here that are important. So number one is we have entity forms here on the website. We call them entities. If you want to do this enrollment process that we're going to go through in a paper format, this is where you would get the paper forms at. So you have the entity authorized legal representative establishment form. There's also a change and some other things. And then an entity new account form. So that would be if you're adding an individual registration underneath your organizational entity profile registration. And there's also a form here called resolution of signing authority. That will actually come up depending on how you register. They may ask for a copy of that form. So we wanted to show you where these forms are. And then I know that Roxanne also mentioned some of the other forms we have here, like withdrawal forms, gifting forms, contribution forms, like if you want to send in a check, there's a contribution form there. But this is where you can get any of those forms that you need to get access to. But what we want to do is go back now and go to and show you where the entity information is. So under the same menu section, go to Organizational ALR, and it brings you to this page. A couple things I want to highlight on this page. So the registration button here at the top is the registration button that will take you into the organizational ALR registration process electronically, and we'll show you that in a minute. Wanted to point out 3 different tabs here. So we have a registration tab, a frequently asked questions tab, and a contact tab. The registration tab is great because we're going to go over a lot of information here today, but if you need to have a refresher on what we talked about a little bit, or you have any questions, there is a video here that talks about just what an individual or what an authorized legal representative is, both individual and organization. It talks about some of the requirements for online registration, what information you will need so that you can have all that information on hand as you're starting the process and maybe not have to stop or run to grab some information after you've gotten started. Some information you'll need to know about the beneficiary. One of the things that we will talk about is that in this online process, not only will you be setting up the profile for your organization, but you also need a new account to open because we need to have one beneficiary account associated with it so that when you log in, there's something to see. If you just file the organizational paperwork, you're not going to be able to log in because there's no account profile to see when you log in. So we need that initial account to be associated with it also. I want to point out this second video on the bottom of this page. So this is a video walkthrough of the registration process that we're going to be going through today. It's about 3 minutes or so, so it's much quicker, but a great thing to review before you go and do it electronically. And it will go through all the steps and talk about the things that you're going to need to do. And then I'll finally at the bottom, depending on the type of organization you are, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit or a governmental organization, you can click on these and it will list for you on the right hand of the screen in the box different types of documentation that may be asked for in order to verify your organization. So all of that is summarized here on the website, and it would be great to look at prior to going through that enrollment. The frequently asked questions are there. Those are helpful, but I also wanted to show this contact box. So this is the way to get a hold of our customer service center. You can always call in, and we'll have that call-in number at the end of the program. But here is one where you can fill out this simple online form and submit it. The great thing about this form is that you're identifying yourself as an organization and where you're from and so forth. And so when that's received by customer service, they're going to route this communication to a specialist within the customer service team to call back out to you or to communicate with you in whatever way that you would like to, but they're going to be somebody who is intimately familiar with this process. They even have resources there should it be necessary and should you desire that can come on a video call with you. And while you're going through the setup process online, and can be there with you step by step in case you run into any errors or things that could pop up or any questions. So those types of resources can be available as well. But when you're ready to start, you just simply click on the register button and it brings you out to this page. We're going to look at this live for a couple of the few first screens, and then we're going to jump over to the slide deck because I don't want to actually enroll in an account live. So here's where you get to the enrollment page. You have a couple informational boxes that can be expanded. I'll click on it, but there's a lot of information, so I'll unclick. Basically what these two boxes do, one of them defines all those roles we already talked about. What is the controlling officer? What is a primary agent? What is a secondary agent? And then the second one is the types of things you'll need to get started, types of information, name of the organization, the tax ID number, address information, things you might need to know about the beneficiary account that you're going to be setting up along with this. And then when you're ready, you can hit continue to go to the next screen. I do want to point out on this screen, though, a very interesting feature. Again, may not necessarily apply, but if you know somebody else within the industry that works with people with disability that need language or different languages, we do have those options both on this enrollment site and then on the account management site. That is actually found by scrolling to the bottom of the page, and in the footer at the right side, you'll see it says English. It's kind of a blue hyperlink. If you click on that, it will bring up all of the different languages that this site and the account management site are currently translated into. And if I go down the list real quick, things like Spanish, French, Korean, Italian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, and Chinese. And I think the Chinese is Cantonese version. There are more languages forthcoming. These are the ones that we have currently. So I just point that out because if you're aware of somebody or yourself that would like to do this in a different language and it's on the list, you can change the language there, and then this whole enrollment process will convert over to that language. Once you're ready to go, though, you hit continue. And before you get to where you're going to start the process, there is a variety of checkboxes that you'll need to acknowledge before it's going to allow you to move on. So you're acknowledging that you're registering as an organization, that you're going to complete this online registration, via that capacity. You're providing information. You've looked at our plan disclosure statement if necessary. You have the organization resolution of authority forms, all of those things. So this is just a final check of the types of things that you're agreeing to and maybe things that you may need before you hit continue and go on into the registration process. So I'll jump back now to the PowerPoint presentation as we go through the registration process. So this screen is the screen that I was just on, this slide, the screen that I was just on. And once you've checked all those boxes, acknowledged all those things and hit continue, you jump right into the first place, which is setting up your email address And this email address is going to be used for lots of different purposes within the registration. First and foremost, this will be the username for your login. So when you go to log into the accounts, this defaults as your username. One of the things that is recommended that you'll kind of see down here below is if your organization is able to make a unique email address specific to this within your office, that is actually a highly recommended. So they just give an example there of like, stable at theorganisationsname.com, right? So really one of the things that's suggested for is twofold. One, that way all of the information is not coming to a single person's individual's email box. If that individual ever leaves the organization or something, who's going to be accessing that email should there be important notifications sent. Secondly, when you set up these types of email boxes, typically you will have multiple people that might have visibility into there. Maybe the primary agent does, maybe the secondary agent does, right? So multiple people can be looking at that and confirming things and understanding what's happening, and you're not just setting it to an individual's personal email box. And then you're making a couple more acknowledgements here. And once you've done that, then we jump right into setting up the organization's information. So the first thing you'll want to do is list the legal name of the organization. It is restricted to 38 characters, so be judicious in how you do that if you happen to have a very long name. But this will be the name that will appear on statements, reports, anything that in which the name of the account needs to show up. It's not going to show up under an individual's name or under an employee's name. It's going to show up under this organization's name. You have your tax ID number. As is common, anything with an asterisk here is a required field to fill in. So you have the tax ID number you'll fill in, at least one phone number. There's an alternate email address. If you want to put an alternate in, it's not required. Typically, we just suggest sticking with the one. A street address, so this would be the actual physical address of the organization. Later on, they'll have an option for an alternate mailing address if you want to send it somewhere else, but this is the physical address. And all the addressing information that you would need. And that's the profile that sets up the organization's base information. After that, it's going to ask you what type of organization you are. At this stage, the choice you make will actually alter slightly for some the flow of the enrollment here on. The nonprofit and governmental flows of the registration are pretty similar with not much different. But if you are a for-profit, company or business or whatever and select that option, there will be some additional screens that we're not showing you today that will come up. Most of those screens deal with beneficial ownership of the company. If an individual is like 25% or more owner of the company, there's some information that's asked about that. So that's really the biggest difference. For our purposes today, we're going to be choosing nonprofit and kind of walking through what that looks like. And so you select nonprofit. There are these information buttons, by the way, which further help to define what we're looking at here as how we would define a nonprofit. So once you've selected that, you hit next. This then summarizes all the information that you've put together at this point. I know some of these screens as we get to these are going to be pretty small. All you really need to understand here is that there are edit buttons by each of the two things, which is the organization's information and the type of organization. And if you see something that was input incorrectly or you want to change, there is an edit button. You can jump back into those screens, change it all before moving on to the next section. So after that, then we start getting into the individuals that are going to be dealing with these accounts for your organization. The first one's going to be the controlling officer. And as mentioned, this is the one that has the authority within the company to make decisions on behalf of the company, in this case, assigning, yes, we are going to do this, and who the primary agent's going to be, things like that. It does ask for personal information here. So, first and last name, social security number, date of birth, phone number, email address, residential address information. Just want to always emphasize here that this is used by our service provider to simply identify the individual and make sure that they are who they say they are, right? And so none of this information after the registration is over will be on any documentation or anything within the account site. It's just simply used at this stage to identify them. We have Bank of New York Mellon, who is one of the providers behind the scenes that is helping to validate all of this and to make sure everything is done correctly. And so they are, because of the size of and being a bank, subject to Patriot Act rules and all kinds of other things. And so there's certain of these requirements that they have to be able to verify and identify individuals as they move through the process to know who they are. You'll notice at the very bottom, it's pretty small, so you may not be able to see it, but if this individual, the controlling officer, is also going to act as the primary agent, there's a button at the bottom you can select before hitting next. And then when you go onto the primary agent slide, it will just autofill with all of the same information that the controlling officer input. So the next one would be the primary agent, similar types of information. Again, the primary agent's the one that's going to have the day-to-day online access to manage the accounts. And you'll put in their personal information and all of those things. Likewise, no attachment to the account, won't find their information anywhere on statements or on anywhere else, just for this stage of things, identifying who they are, making sure that everything matches, systems and we're all good. And then that's the end of any information we'd ever asked for about that individual. The secondary agent we mentioned is optional, but if you wanted to add one, you would do that on the next screen. You can add up to 2, but these are the individuals that would have phone access and could back up the primary agent in case there was a necessity to do so. I'll reiterate once more, we are looking into that possibility in the future, working with our program manager, Vestwell, to try to expand login capabilities so that maybe we could have 2 agents that could log into the same profile and be able to more easily manage. But presently, only the one, the primary, and then the secondary would have the phone access. So you'd put in their personal information here. After that, we get to a review screen again. So similarly, anything there that doesn't look correct, hit the edit button, go back to the screens, fix it, come back. But once it all looks correct, then at the very bottom, you can hit next. After that is done, that is the entirety of the organizational enrollment. The organizational information is now there. And the next thing that the online system is going to do then is then ask you about creating the first beneficiary account attached to this profile. I will mention that if you have been already managing accounts and you're trying to convert sort of to this process, you'd still need to set up a beneficiary account at this point, and then we can work with you after the fact to migrate any existing accounts underneath this profile once this is set up and ready to go. But presently on the online system, both steps need to be completed, the organizational and the first account for it to be completed. If you have accounts that you want to put under a registration without having an account to open up right at this point in time, you can fill out the paper form. All the same information that you're seeing on the online form is on the paper form. The paper form then could just be sent in to create the organizational structure. And then again, we would work with you after the fact to migrate underneath that existing accounts that you are currently managing that you want to put under that registration. But here you'd list the things that you would expect: beneficiaries' first name, last name, social security number, birth date. You can mention how they identify, their address. And then again, this would be primarily their residential address. Oops, let's go back to that one. Oh, anyways, residential address, and then you move on to their eligibility information. And Roxanne mentioned some of this. Are they becoming eligible because of SSI or SSDI? Do they have a doctor's certification? You'd select which one is appropriate. It also asks you for a diagnosis code at this point in time. That would be their disability diagnosis. The one thing I will mention about the disability diagnosis will come at a later screen, but we have a really cool feature on our system where if you're not sure what code fits, you can actually type into a search box the actual name of the disability that you're working with, and it will suggest which of the diagnosis codes that disability falls in. So that's another option to have. You have here, is the individual making this their own account, or is somebody doing it on behalf of the individual? So obviously in this case, the beneficiary is unable to establish their own account, so you're doing it for them, and you put in what your relationship is. Right here on this example, we put representative payee, which is probably by and large what most organizations are going to fall under. And then you make a number of certifications about things concerning the account. You also have, so this is a reiteration of the eligibility information, but I wanted to come to this one. So this is the one that shows you that diagnosis code box, where you have sort of the search at the very top. If you're not sure, each of the codes does have a couple of disabilities or disorders underneath them identified that are kind of more prominent to that disability code, but still there can be some unusual or out of the box ones that we haven't heard much about but exist. And so that's where the search button would come in. If the search can't find it, if it's one that isn't within the system at all, at least that way, you can always choose code 7, which is other, and just report it that way, and that's fine. And then this is just a reiteration of some of the same information we just saw about is a disability permanent, you're opening the account, and what your relationship is to the beneficiary. Here's another one too, for your relationship to the beneficiary. It is a drop down, so you can go through all of the ones that were listed that Roxanne let us know about, select the most appropriate one, and that will auto-populate that relationship box. You have communication preferences, the emailing, so you have, for example, email, or you don't want electronic communications, you can select that as well. There's other checkboxes that you have that can update you about new plan features. If you want to receive text messages or SMS updates, you can select that as well. The mailing address here can be the same as the address entered previously as the permanent address, or it could be different if you want things mailed to a different address. PO boxes are acceptable here, but they're not acceptable under the primary physical address for the individual. Then you go to create your login. So we already have the email address that was put in at the very beginning. That's going to auto-populate for you. Then you'll just need to create your passwords. Similar type of password structure as you're probably familiar with complex passwords needing to have at least 10 characters, number, upper lowercase, symbol, trying to make it more secure to be able to handle that. Here is a massive screen that you don't need to really look at much. It's just a review screen. So this goes through all of the stuff that you've done and just pointing out that in each step of the way, when you get to a review screen, you have the chance to edit and go back should there be anything within the review that you want to change. You also have communication preferences that we just talked about. That's going to be confirmed here. If you want to change any of those, we edit it because this is a review screen. Once that is reviewed and everything looks good, you have the button at the bottom that is Create My Account. We also have two-factor authentication, which is going to be asked for you to set up. This is for obvious safety purposes and getting into and accessing the account. These are not only a vulnerable population, but just the way the world is going, we want to make sure that we have extra safety features when people are getting in to accounts where they have access to the type of information and control that they do. This can be done through two ways. You can use an authentication app, primarily like a Google Authenticator or Microsoft, or you can use a phone number via text message, to be able to receive, I guess, a call or a text, but typically I think text is probably most common. You'll put your number in. Again, you can verify that via the text message or the voice call, and that would be your authentication method that you'll start using to log into the account and for other purposes. This is just an example where you put in the security code once it's sent to you, and then you would continue to the portal. And then the final step, oops, well, this one shows it too. Let me go back one though. The final step that we have is documentation verification. So at this stage, there will be some verification that's happening behind the scenes for the controlling officer, the primary agent, and the beneficiary. So all of that will be done behind the scenes by the bank and all the tools they have. But this is for the organization's verification. So depending on which type of organization you chose in your setup, whether you be nonprofit, for-profit, or governmental, there's going to be some additional documentation they want to see. It's very difficult for them through public means to necessarily always confirm a company's information, and so they just ask for some simple documentation to verify, yes, indeed, you are a legitimate company or entity or organization, and that's where you would do this. The second one also shows some screens where that can be uploaded in various formats, PDFs, picture files, PNG or JPEG, and so forth. And you can upload those. There's one that's shown here on the bottom right where if you're a governmental individual, then instead of giving like a driver's license or something, and you can just have a copy of a governmental issued photo ID that you could upload, just so they have something on file to verify who you are and that you're with that particular organization. So with that, we're going to stop at this point to conclude with any particular questions that individuals might have. I will mention, and we'll get to this at the conclusion, and I'll probably let Roxanne talk about that more. We are going to have another webinar in 2 weeks. I'll let Roxanne announce what that one's going to be primarily about, but that one will be a good one as well, so that after you set up your organizational structure, you got an account there, then how do you manage the account? And we'll be going over some of those kind of things. But we can bring Roxanne back at this point. And then whoever's controlling the the unlocking of the microphones and so forth, or if there's any in chat that we want to read out loud. I am not looking at the chat specifically. We'll definitely take some questions and maybe do that for 5 to 7 minutes or more, and then wrap it up.
No, thank you, Tom. This is incredibly helpful. I think on this call, we probably have a variety of folks that have never even visited the website yet to see, everything that you mentioned and talked about. And then we have folks that may have visited, they've started the process, maybe something stopped them through the process. But let's go ahead and take questions real quick right now. What I did do is Tom had mentioned that if you if you need to complete this org ALR registration process, but you don't have a new account to add, in other words, you already have existing stable accounts, they were set up as an individual ALR. So you wouldn't be able to complete the online registration method. So instead, you would just simply complete the form, the paper form, and you would submit that. Now, I want to mention, so I included the link to that form in the chat, but Tom, can you tell us, should they include a list of the current accounts that they are currently managing with that enrollment form? Like, what can they do to notify, whoever's going to receive and process the form, this form, that they have accounts that need to be moved over? What does that next step look like?
Yeah, great question, Roxanne. So it can be done either way, although I would think if you want to expedite things faster, then providing a listing of the existing accounts with the application form definitely would be preferable. That can be even done in like a Word document or an Excel document where you're just simply listing definitely the account numbers. If you have all the account numbers, their first and last name of the individuals. And then print that off, attach it to the paper application form, send that in. Maybe even you can even write a hand note on there if you want to, or type in a note saying, existing accounts that need to be, migrated underneath this organization, something of that nature. And then when they get that and they're processing it, definitely I expect there could be some coordination that they need to do with you, and they may reach out to you in order to do that. But yeah, that's a great suggestion. If you don't include one, then what they'll probably do at some point is reach back out to you after they process the paper form and say, we didn't see an account form. What are we doing about that? And then at that time, you could relay the information that I didn't submit a new account because I have existing ones. Let me supply the list and do it that way. But definitely if they're together to start, that would expedite the process and not only getting the account open, but then getting those accounts actively associated so that you can get in and start managing them that way.
Okay. I'm working on unmuting everyone, and my apologies that I didn't figure out how to do that in advance, but we do have some questions in the chat that I'd like to go ahead and mention. So a question early on by Kimberly Clark. Can you transfer a current account into the ALR? So we know that you can do that. You just have to complete this org ALR registration process first. And as Tom just mentioned, follow those instructions. So Kim, does that answer your question? And if not, please be sure to include more in the chat. And then again, I'm going to go in here and try to unmute everybody. Let's see. The next question, Kim Blanton said, I got to the third page, but it didn't take me to the ALR page.
Okay.
I'm going to try to unmute Kim so she can go into more detail about that. Next question is Emily Brown. I am the director of a nonprofit, and we currently do rep payee services through Social Security. We have been approached by someone to become a payee for an individual who currently has an account through West Virginia ABLE. I'm just wanting to get as much information as possible so that I can go before we go forward with being their payee ALR. We currently are bonded as required by Social Security, but have a board member inquire as to if our bond will have to be changed, adjusted if we take this on as well.
Yeah, the question of the bond would be one that you would want to ask somebody legal about. I don't know all the different situations in the state of West Virginia and the rules there, but I'll say from the ABLE standpoint, yeah, it's absolutely no problem whether you wanted to do it as an organizational registration or even an individual registration to move an existing account underneath your purview. Obviously, our recommendation is if you're acting under the auspices of an organization or an entity or a nonprofit in this case, then register that way. And then we can migrate that account. Definitely, there's going to be some coordination that's going to need to be had between the existing authorized legal representative on that account and yourself and Vestwell, our vendor, to make sure that all are in agreement that this account needs to transfer and so forth. But yeah, that's not a problem at all to work with moving that account from another individual or organization that's managing it over to your organizational structure.
Okay. And then I do believe that the individual, if you want to ask a question verbally, that you can do that. You just unmute your microphone. I believe I've set it up to where you have the ability to do that on your end now. So just making sure. If you are not a rep payee, do you need to be bonded to become an ALR? My organization is a waiver service provider.
Yeah, so again, a great question. The bond issue is more, I would say, on the West Virginia legal side of the question. From ABLE standpoint, as long as you fall under one of the authorized legal representative categories, which were mentioned previously, like a representative payee or you're a guardian or a conservator or you have a power of attorney, as long as any of those apply from our standpoint, you're able to open and manage an account.
And then a couple tips, Tom, and some of this I think we've already mentioned, but I just kind of want to reiterate because it's calls that I get from folks that are completing the org ALR. These are just these additional tips. So if you're completing the online org ALR and you include an email address and the system stops and it says we already have an email address associated with a stable account. So at that point, the recommendation is that you would create an email account address that would be specifically used for your org ALR. So that's a method in which to bypass that. Of course, the ultimate goal is to get those accounts under your org ALR, but for now, you're just the tip would be to create that new specific just to this org ALR. If you are then answering additional questions and you're the controlling officer or the primary secondary agent, you include a Social Security number that's already been associated with an existing stable account. It'll stop you and say, oh, this Social Security number is already in the system with an existing stable account. That is a prompt in which there's no way to bypass that. Simply what that means is you're going to have to complete the paper form. And again, that's in there too, right, Tom? Is that, yeah. Yeah, it seems like that's, one of those hiccups that folks run into. And so just know that, again, you're just going to submit that paper form. Another piece that we get is, let's say that somebody is an org ALR and they're approached by another ALR who is managing a stable account. and they need to move that stable account over to the org ALR. Which form, Tom, do they use to complete that process? So we have an individual ALR, and they need to move it to an org ALR.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because we have two forms out there. They're both change of authorized legal representative forms. If it's going from, this would be my assumption, and I can double check on this myself, but if it's going from an individual to an organization, I would use the regular change of authorized legal representative form. But we do have one out there for organizations, but typically that's if you're moving it from an organization to an organization. You know, either one, as long as the information on there is completed and both sides have signed it, which is the most critical part of this, is that both sides have signed it saying, I'm relinquishing authority and I'm accepting, the authority, then really either form can be used, but it's just a matter of how the boxes are structured on each of them and the type of information that's being asked. Both are out on the form site, but I would generally think if it's going from an individual, they'd use the individual ALR change form. But if it's an organization sending it to an organization, then I would use the organizational one or the entity one.
Okay. And then we're going to go back to Kimberly Clark's second question point. Okay, well, let's do that now. So Kim, as a follow-up to her initial question, she said, so am I understanding correctly that if you are not an entity on your ALR list, your organization cannot be an ALR organization?
So if I'm interpreting that correctly, so if you're not like governmental, non-for-profit, or for-profit, is that?
I think what she means is she had earlier asked if you're not a rep payee, do you need to be bonded to become an ALR? Yeah. So this is, I guess, Kim, I think what you're saying is if you're not a rep payee and you don't also have any other of those relationships that were listed, can you be an ALR? Can you be an organizational ALR?
Yeah. And the simple question or the simple answer, unfortunately, is one, it is required to identify how you're arriving at your authority to do this. That list is provided through federal law from the Internal Revenue Service, and so we really don't have any flexibility to add to or change that particular list. So I would say, unfortunately, if you can't identify with any of those on the list that would fall into what capacity you have, then you wouldn't be able to open and manage an account. There is one on the list we didn't mention, but it's kind of a very nuanced one, and that is if the individual with a disability is over the age of 18 and has capacity to make decisions, that has a cognitive ability to make decisions, they can actually also just simply appoint who they want to be their ALR. How you ever prove that out, I don't know, but it's actually part of the law. And so one of the things that you could also select as a choice is they appointed me to be their ALR. I would probably, if that were the case, create some kind of documentation to show that that was the case, and we don't have a standard form or anything to fill out for that. But that would be the only other one around the list that we presented. But it's a pretty rigid list there of what they want to allow to do this. And unfortunately, you need to be in one of those capacities to do it.
Yeah. I have had some calls from folks where they're kind of in that transition. They're not yet the rep payee, but they're going to be. But this account, they wanted, maybe they're working with another organization who wants to see that account being moved over. And so it's just a matter of time, obtaining that Social Security rep payee status. And once you are, then you can absolutely move that account under your org ALR status. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And my apologies. I hope that you're able to unmute yourself. And it sounds like perhaps maybe folks are not able to do that. So we are continuing to visit the chat. And so Emily Brown asks, if we are becoming someone's rep payee, can we begin the org ALR process? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think you may have just sort of answered that, Roxanne. I think the best practice probably would be to wait until you are actually designated as such. But if you feel comfortable going through the process, and when you come to the question that asks about authority and you're comfortable clicking that, knowing that it's in the works or it's going to happen, then I guess, conceivably you could go through and set that up. but you are sort of at that point, stating and sort of testifying under oath, if you will, that this is the capacity under which I'm managing the account. And if you're not that status, then, but you're going to be, it's kind of a little bit of a grayish area. I think the best practice would be wait until you're officially the rep payee and everything is kosher, legally, and then move forward. But, I can see how somebody would want to get a head start and try to get a jump on it.
Yeah. So Tom, would Stable go ahead and process just the org ALR piece so they can kind of get that piece set up, and then they would just be waiting to then add the first account, in which they would then be they would wait until they're the rep payee? Would Stable process that form in the registration form?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of that, if you're not adding a first beneficiary account, then you do have to use a paper application. But even on that application, they're basically looking at the information you're submitting. They're not necessarily scrutinizing every little tiny piece of it. If as long as they have documentation and backup and the information that they need, you're submitting this, you're sort of testifying, if you will, that you're in this capacity and you're setting this up. So, yeah, that wouldn't stop the process from going forward, unless by chance they ask you for specific representative payee documentation. But I don't believe that's one of the types of documentation that we typically ask for. We just essentially take your word for it that you're acting in that capacity.
Okay. So Emily, did that? Well, here's another one. If you are, oh, no, so that was it. And Emily, did that help to answer your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it did. This is all kind of new to me. I mean, I've heard of West Virginia ABLE. Roxanne and I talked to the other day, and but the process, I've got 126 payees currently. This is the first time I've ever been approached by somebody who already has an ABLE account. But I know that we would have to be their payee in order to do that. I just wasn't sure how the timelines match up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How long of a process is it once you submit the organization ALR stuff until everything's processed? Ballpark.
That's a really great question. And this will be a very ballpark answer. Definitely, if you do the online enrollment system, and assuming that all of the additional documentation, everything is in proper order, then there's no reason it couldn't be set up. I would say for like 5 to 7 business days, something like that, to have everything checked over, looked at, and finished. If it's a paper application process, of course, you're building in time for the paperwork to get there, to get scanned into the system, for somebody to review it. Again, assuming that all the documentation is in good order with whatever types of additional backup information that you need. I would say probably a couple weeks at the most. But again, a lot of that can really depend on, is there any information that's missing that they need to try to communicate with you about to get this all figured out. But I would say online 5-7 business days, paper application probably twice that, depending on speed of mail and some other the factors that are hard to define.
The mail's not the greatest system anymore.
Yeah. Which is why we like the online, but we also understand the online is very rigid in what you have to submit. And if you don't have all of the information to submit, then it's not always usable by everybody. But it is definitely the fastest and most secure way to do it if you meet all of those requirements.
So we can do the online even if the account is already established.
As long as you have another account to add when you're doing the online process. So if you have another account to open, then yes, you could do the online process, open the account for a new beneficiary. And then once that's complete and everything's up and running and you're logged in and you can see that account in the online system, then we'll work with you to get the other one moved underneath your profile so that you can manage that.
Okay, so we would have to do a paper, because this account's been established, my understanding, for at least a year. So, Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, these are really great questions. I will tell you, just from experience of an organization that completed the online method. I believe it was on a Friday that I talked to her, And then I believe it was on Tuesday the following week that they were all set up. And so then at that point, they were then adding accounts under their org ALR. Now, want to mention real quick that in 2 weeks, we are offering another special topic webinar. It's all about how to use your stable accounts. So once you become an org ALR, you're using your login credentials to access that first account. Now we're going to talk about how do you manage this account. So for whether you're an individual or whether you're an organization, that online platform looks the same. But we're going to talk about all the ways in which to make contributions, to make withdrawals, what that, and Tom is going to take you through a walkthrough of what that platform looks like and just how to more easily navigate around that platform. And then we will take about 15 minutes time just for you organizations that are an organization ALR, because there are additional features that is specific to you. So for those of you that manage 10, let's say, stable accounts as an individual, you do not have access to this additional features that InvestWell has created just for the organization. So we're super excited to be able to share that with you, and we will commit that time just for the organizations included in this next webinar. So if you haven't already registered, I've included the links to register for that webinar. Again, the first bulk of it is going to be applied to anyone that owns an account, anyone that's managing the account, okay, whether it's an individual or org. And then, of course, focus on the organization, your ability to run specific reports or do bulk contributions, those sorts of things. So Tom is definitely so very well versed in all of that. So I'm even excited to get another review of all that. Those are the things that I don't necessarily get to see on my end. So I'm looking forward to learning about that too. But really appreciate, Tom, you providing this overview. And do we have any other questions? I believe you all can unmute yourself. Now is definitely the time. Tom is definitely the expert that has all this great knowledge. And I want to make sure that we get it in your hands if you have any other questions that maybe we didn't get to or that has come up.
And I'll mention, Roxanne, too, to plug this presentation or this opportunity in 2 weeks. One other thing that we'll be going over that sometimes isn't always as intuitive, but it's very good to know about and important, is how do I set up additional accounts electronically once I have, the access to the portal, right? So there's an easy way to go in and add additional accounts once you have that first or other accounts migrated, and we'll touch upon that as well.
Okay. Yep. No, that's perfect. So in the meantime, we will send out the slide deck to this PowerPoint via email by tomorrow so that you'll have those slides to reference. Contact information, Tom shared that as well. It is not uncommon that folks will shoot me an email or they'll give me a quick call, and I welcome those calls. I'm in contact with Tom and the InvestWell folks, so we can, if you're running into a hiccup or an issue, we want to get those mitigated, and we don't want you to feel like you're just on this island, not just trying to figure this out by yourself. So just know that we're here to provide that extra layer of support. So if we don't have any other questions, we will conclude the webinar. And Tom, thank you so much. You're incredibly helpful and insightful and experienced, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share all this with us today. We will have this recorded. So for those of you that want to watch this again, maybe just to refer to reference, or if you have colleagues within your organization that you would like for them to have this training, we will be sharing the recording to this as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you back in 2 weeks where we can then teach you all about managing your accounts. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom.